Wednesday, May the 22nd, and I call this meeting of Budget and Finance to order. Committee members, please make sure to put up your committee tag if you don't mind so that members of the viewing audience can identify who is actually on our Budget and Finance Committee. Today, we're going to start off with our Finance Department. Colleagues, you can find their information in our budget book in section C, starting on page 163. I did want to give two quick reminders. Your wish lists are coming due, so please make sure that you get those in on time. The first version of your wish list is due tomorrow at 6:30. You can also look at the budget calendar. If you have any questions about any of the upcoming due dates, you can find that in the SharePoint. So please make sure to reference that. Also, I wanted to remind everyone that our final two community listening sessions will be this Saturday on the 25th. The first one will be at 10 o'clock a.m. at the Southeast Community Center in Southeast Nashville. And then at 2 p.m., we'll be joining our friends in Hermitage at the Hermitage Library. Everyone is welcome from all parts of town. Even if you don't live in that part of town, you're more than welcome to come out. And then, of course, we will have our public hearing on June the 4th at the regularly scheduled 6:30 p.m. council meeting. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. We do have our Finance Director, Director Kevin Crumbo with us. Mr. Crumbo, you are recognized.
Well, good afternoon. Kevin Crumbo, the Finance Director, and I'm joined here by our own budget analyst, Lone Woon. And our purpose, as you can tell, looking at the ranks of finance folks on either side, is to absolutely overwhelm you. And so we have brought our full leadership team here, and I think most of you have met most of them at one time or another. Finances department that's got a sizable scope of operations that range all the way from our accounting and financial reporting to payroll, public properties, treasury, budgets, grants and accountability, purchasing. And if you think that's all, we also have our diversity, equity, and inclusion group for the Metro government housed at Metro Finance. And it's been my pleasure and privilege to lead this team twice, 2 years during the Cooper administration, and then for this first year here of the O'Connell administration. So this is a group that I have really come to rely upon. We have, since I was here once before, some new faces in the group. We also have some that have been with us a very, very long time. As we approach this next year with this team, I am, I guess, saddened to say on the one hand, but thrilled on the other that our longtime Director of Finance that preceded me, Talia Lomax O'Neill, she will be retiring in June, and she says, for real, she really is going to retire. But those are some shoulders that all of us have stood on for a very long time, and will certainly be sad for us, but happy for her as she moves on into her retirement in June. So with that said, I know most of you that I see sitting here are quite familiar with finance and the finance department. Our budget for this year ahead is going to look stunningly just like the one that we are in. And that is primarily because we are approaching full staffing. We do have a few open positions, which is quite common for us. Departments like ours tend to have some natural attrition, turnover, retirements, as I mentioned, and so forth. And at any given time, we'll have a few open slots. But at this moment, we are nearly at full capacity. And I expect that we'll maintain that through most of the year. The only large change that I think you can expect for us in the year ahead, very positive one, we will be adding staff members in our treasury function, primarily to manage the investments in our pension. Our pension is a real bright spot in the Metro financial picture. It is nearly fully funded. It has a number of years of payouts available. And if you're a beneficiary of that today, you're a lucky soul. Our pension is one of the best in the nation at this moment. And I think that's a real, again, a bright spot for us. What we're going to be doing there is starting to add some positions, primarily to look after those investments in terms of how we invest it, but also how we comply with policies, procedures, new laws, and so forth that govern investments. And as we add those positions, I think important for all of you to know that those will be reimbursed to the Metro government by the Pension Trust Fund. So as we add those and you see the headcount changes and the dollar changes there in our budget, that is solely because we as a Metro government need to be the employer and the administrator of that. But as we do it, dollar for dollar, those will be reimbursed to us by the Pension Trust Fund. The Employee Benefits Board oversees those monies, and both their investment committee as well as their full board has approved this plan, and I think are quite happy to do it as those assets grow. So with that, I will stop and just take whatever questions you may have from the budget information that we've provided to you.
Director Crumbo, thank you so very much for that presentation, and thank you for the work that you've done on our budget. It looks like Councilmember Allen has a question. I did want to congratulate you all on recently being acknowledged for the DEI work that we've done in our Metro budget, and I would love if you could just take a brief moment to speak on that, to inform to let the rest of the body know.
Yeah, I would be delighted to do that. I think that as I look around the room, at least a few of you were members of the council, and you legislated a new position for DEI. And I know that acronym enjoys some different names in different circles, but for us, our diversity, our equity, and inclusion. And we started out with our very first hire on that a few years ago, Andrea Blackman, who at that time was no stranger to Metro herself. She had been at Metro Libraries and just had earned a marvelous reputation there. And she has brought that with her to Metro Finance. And I think the wisdom of putting this position in finance is quite simply, that's where the checkbook is, and that's where we can make a lot of difference. So through the last few years, as we've added to that team, I believe there are now about a half a dozen positions there. They work all over the Metro government in different capacities, promoting the themes that we have out of that department. And what Councilmember Porterfield is referring to is that they've been recognized a number of times on the national stage, most recently by a group in California that included some of the leading folks in the nation on these topics. So we're glad to have them here in Nashville, and I expect that that group will continue to grow for a long time to come.
Thank you so very much. And Council Lady Allen, you are recognized.
Thank y'all for being here. Thanks for keeping our finances in good order. I feel like we're in good, solid position. That's great. I see under the, at a glance that it lists 1.3 million for those 7 FTEs that you mentioned that will be managing the pension. So I'm excited to know that that will be reimbursed. Does that reimbursement show up anywhere as revenue in this budget?
Yes, that's exactly what will happen. And there'll be a bit of a timing as we onboard that, make it our staff, and then we will have to put in place a mechanism by which that trust just reimburses the Metro government. But we expect that that will be a dollar for dollar reimbursement, and we will host it internally.
But is it currently in the budget somewhere under some administrative fund or something?
Yes, if you look at the under glance under revenue,
In the,
on the summary page under charges, commission, and fees, right below it, where it say other government agency, you see 1.3, the exact same amount.
Okay.
Under
so it's coming
revenues.
back in. Great. Okay. Thank you for that. And then I think that's all I have so far. I may think of something later.
A challenge question.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Nash, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If memory serves me right, we used to have investment advisors that kind of told the benefit board what to do. Are we no longer outsourcing that and bringing it in-house, or is this kind of as an adjunct?
So this will be in addition to. We have just simply outgrown the outside advisory functions, and really for our own benefit moving forward, we need to have a much closer view of those investments. They're up to nearly $4 billion at this moment, and as the world of investing becomes more complex, particularly as we look at more private investments, which is a big share of our portfolio today, we're going to need more resources in order to really keep an eye on those for the long term.
Thank you, and I would like to thank you and the taxpayers of the city for my pension and the pension of all my fellow retirees. Thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that. It truly is a bright spot for us as a Metro government.
Thank you. And just for anyone who might be listening, Councilmember Nash is referring to his pension as a former Metro employee. Council members do not get pension. We get $23,000 and a lot of stress, but we don't get pension. So for anybody that's watching, I want to make sure that was clear. Colleagues, do we have any other questions? Seeing none, Director Crumbo, I will I'll wrap us up with just one more brief question. This is in regards to the budgeting process, and we've had this conversation, but I keep getting it, and people in the viewing audience have questions about it. Can you kind of briefly explain how we get to flat revenue projections? Because what we hear from constituents are, the cranes are in the air, and, people feel like we should have more money than we actually have. So if you all could just kind of briefly touch on that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to do that. So at this moment, we're not going to talk about the finance budget, but just the Metro budget overall and the flat revenue projections that we have. So really what we have as a city right now is a growing economy. And it's one that's been growing for a couple of decades now. And to the point about cranes in the air and other, symbols and signs we can see, we certainly have those. But we also have is that economy is starting to slow down just a bit as it pertains to Davidson County. And as we see that start to slow down a little bit, that's really just a function of saying our hotels are filling up, our venues are filling up, our businesses are filling up. And for us to continue just this stunning growth we've had for a long time, that's not a sustainable economy for any economy across the globe through history. And so we're going to start to see that right now. We may see other growth in the future, but as an economy, that's really where we are. The Metro government share of that really is comprised of three major components. The first of those are revenues we get from property taxes, which is just a little over half of our revenue. That is the most stable form of revenue that we can have. Our next largest source of that are our activities taxes. And while those, for most cities, most of the time are very stable, most of us remember the pandemic when those took a really steep nosedive for a period of time. So that is our second source. As I mentioned, with the economy starting to flatten out a little bit, we too will see those flatten. And then we've got grants and other monies that come to us through our fees and so forth of our own. That's a much smaller component of our revenue. So we're expecting on the whole for this next year for those to all add up and be pretty flat. It would be terrific if we see those grow in some way. If that happens, then those monies, of course, flow to our bottom line and those can be reappropriated at another point. But right now we're forecasting it to be flat. And I think as we roll into the years ahead, you can look to see property reappraisal is going to be in the next year. And then we'll be doing some other things, I think, to stimulate the economy through the transit plan and other actions like that.
Thank you so very much, Director Crumbo. And Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you. Since you brought that up, can you just talk about the difference between supplemental appropriations mid-year because we discover we have lots more revenue, or the surplus fund if we discover there's more in the surplus fund, that's a very different type of, so if we discover we're going gangbusters and there's more money to be had and we can meet needs that get brought up during this process, there's sort of two different directions that could go, and one we could use for operating and the other we can only use for one time. So if you can say that in more official language, that's helpful to understand, I think.
So I'm going to do two things for you. One is I will do my best to give a short oral presentation of that here. This question is coming up more and more, and I think it'll be beneficial. You have an FAQ or something by that name for the council website. So we'll go ahead and write something up, get that posted so that it's very specific. So the easiest way that I think about this is, one, if we turn the clock back about a year or so ago, the Metro government implemented a fund balance policy, and that requires our operating accounts as well as our debt service accounts to have a certain reserve to them. And that is there for the most dire of circumstances, and the criteria by which we can tap that means that the economy's in a recession or some other terrible things are happening here, we really need to tap it. On top of that, when that came around for fiscal year 23, Director Flannery at the time, I think very wisely cautioned that that was one of the near years from the pandemic. It was going to be very hard to predict. And so a conservative revenue estimate was put in place at that time, with the idea being, much as you say, if there is more money, then that can be appropriated at a later date. What the council did at that moment was they went ahead and said, if you have a surplus of a certain amount, roughly $130 million, then here are the categories for you to spend that on. And if you have more money than that, then that will be an excess surplus. And those words, when you're not putting numbers right next to them, start to get to be pretty confusing. And that same ordinance for the fiscal 24, it was fiscal year 24, then looking back at fiscal year 23, it goes on to say a few things about that. And one is that surplus will be available when the audited financial statements for fiscal year 23 are available. And those come available in January of 2024. So you're now into the 2024 fiscal year. So those did become available. We did declare a surplus and we did distribute those monies. On top of that, there was an excess surplus, and that was of some $70 million or so. Of that, more than half of that was left to all of that was left to the discretion of the finance director to deploy. And there's a pretty stiff criteria set along with that. Throughout the course of the year, I've deployed some of those monies. They mainly have gone to restore all of our judgments, losses, weather events, in that category, which was allowed. Some for the Arts Commission, and then some others have gone to parks and OEM causes that were pretty urgent. But other than that, the remainder is rolling into this next fiscal year. Most all of those monies will be used as the cushion, if you will, so that if we have some forecasting error, so if we have revenues that are less than we anticipate, or we have some expenses that are more than we anticipate and so forth, that there is some cushion, so that'll keep you from digging into that big reserve that I described a moment ago. As we come into this fiscal year budgeting, we're looking to do the very same thing. And so if there is a surplus that comes around due to the audit, we'll start this cycle essentially again. Does that help?
And then one final question. In some previous years, there has been a mid-year budget adjustment. We haven't done it in the past couple of years or so, but surplus, I can't remember maybe it's a surplus allocation. I can't remember. You don't seem like the kind of person that would do that. So I'm just, is that a thing that exists, or is that just bad policy and we should not even be thinking about that?
So I don't really have an opinion about that. That's not something we've done on my watch, unless we would look back at the pandemic era and kind of recharacterize some of the emergency actions we needed to take during that period. So I don't really have a comment as whether that's been the right thing or the wrong thing to do in the past. But ideally, once we set the revenue forecast, we'd like for it to be accurate, but we'd like for it to be conservative, because if we're going to budget up to that revenue amount, we'd like to be certain of that. And then, if we have some extra later in the year, then we have some mechanisms to deal with it. The opposite, of course, would leave us short, and that would create problems all of their own. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Thank you, Director Crumbo in Finance. We, again, appreciate all the hard work that you all have done to keep everything going throughout the year. Also, all the hard work that y'all are doing right now throughout the budget season. So with that, we are going to go ahead and end this hearing and go into our next hearing. For anyone that is viewing, it will be a new YouTube link. So you can go ahead and go to the next link. Now we will have to present the mayor's budget.